Good morning, everyone. It's my honor to introduce Dr. Joy Mighty to you. Dr. Mighty is a senior university administrator and professor at Carleton University in Ottawa, Canada. From 2012 to 2018, Dr. Mighty served as the Associate Vice President, Teaching and Learning, and held a joint appointment as a full professor in the Sprott School of Business and the Pauline Jewett Institute of Women's and Gender Studies in the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences. After a year's administrative leave, upon her return to Carleton, Dr. Mighty has assumed the position of Senior Scholar for Innovation in Teaching and Learning at Carleton University. Dr. Mighty previously served as the Director of the Centre for Teaching and Learning at Queen's University and is a full professor in the Queen's School of Business. Prior to her work at Queen's, she was the coordinator of the Teaching and Learning Centre and a professor in the Faculty of Business Administration at the University of New Brunswick. Born in Georgetown, Guyana, Dr. Mighty has an eclectic academic background and a wealth of experience as an administrator, teacher, educational developer, researcher, and consultant. She obtained her BA in English Honours, postgraduate diploma in education, MA in Education, and postgraduate diploma in Management Studies from the University of the West Indies in Jamaica. She earned her MBA from Howard University in Washington, D.C., and her PhD in Organizational Behavior from the School of Business at York University, Toronto. Dr. Mighty has received numerous awards for excellence in teaching, research, and extraordinary service and professional leadership. Her special interests are organizational development and change, as well as equity, diversity, and the scholarship of teaching and learning. She is also co-editor of the highly acclaimed publication, Taking Stock, Research in Teaching and Learning in Higher Education. Dr. Mighty, welcome. We look forward to your presentation, and the title of which is Reconsidering Scholarship, Why Your Teaching Matters. Over to you.
Have to reposition here. Perfect. Good morning, everyone. Let's try that again. Good morning, everyone. That's better. Thank you so much, Kim, for that kind introduction. Thank you very much for your warm welcome, everyone. I feel very much at home here. And I thank you, Antoinette, for inviting me to come and join you. It's my first visit to Stellenbosch, but not my first visit to South Africa. And I have to say that I brought you the rain, which I know you need, so be grateful. But I could have done without the cold. I'm leaving a cold place. I expected it to be a little warmer here. So do something, whatever you do, make it warmer, right? But I am glad to be here, and I thank you so much for inviting me. I want to congratulate you all for actively engaging in the scholarship of teaching and learning. That this is the 12th year of this conference speaks volumes of your passion for and your commitment to this topic. And it is especially heartening to know that you're taking time to explore why your teaching matters. Today, I want to raise some questions to help you in that exploration. Time will not allow us to explore in depth your answers to all of these questions, but I hope you will find the time to reflect on them, perhaps sometime before the next annual SOTL conference. So what I propose doing in this address is to help you to reconsider your scholarship by reflecting on the following. Let's see if I get this to work. This is my first challenge. There we go. First, your motivation for teaching and the ideology or the philosophy underlying that motivation. Then we look at social identity, the social identity of your students and the teaching behaviors that arise from these social identities and from your teaching philosophy or ideology. Next, I will present an integrated framework for teaching and learning that takes all of these variables into consideration. And finally, I want to suggest steps in reconsidering your scholarship of teaching and learning to help you enhance or transform your teaching behaviors so that they are socially impactful. I want to begin by asking you to take a moment to reflect on why you teach. Think about why your teaching matters and what would happen if you did not teach. Jot down, if you will, 2 or 3 bullet points that you would use to complete the statement, my teaching matters because, ... Think about that for a moment, and I will shut up to give you a chance to do that. Thank you. Even if you didn't write, I know you're thinking. Now, perhaps we can hear some of your reasons for teaching. We'll just take a few of your responses. Can we get a response from over here? Anybody? What's one of your reasons for teaching? Yes?
Maybe that's because it helps me to empower others.
Because it helps you to empower others. Good. That's a very good reason for teaching. Yes? Can we have one from the middle here? No? Are you shy? I see people, I can tell that you want to do it. So how about right at the back there? Oops. Yep. That's you turning your head. That's you. Yes, go ahead.
Because I can change the world.
Wow, what a wonderful reason for teaching. I can actually sit down because that was what I was going to say. So you did it for me. Thank you. What about over here? Anybody? Yes, go ahead.
For the future of our youth and our country.
Sorry, I didn't get.
For the future of our youth and our country.
For the future of your youth, and you have such wonderful ideal reasons for teaching. I didn't hear anybody say because of the vast wealth and the fame it will bring you. I'm just kidding. I know that it doesn't do that. But these answers correspond loosely to 4 different ideologies that Trowler, in a 20-year-old study, Trowler, this is a 1998 study, he clustered the responses of academics from the UK, hundreds of academics from the UK, whom he had interviewed about why teaching matters to them. And these ideologies are progressivism, that focuses on student development by defending students' interests and ensuring equal opportunities and wider participation for all students. Traditionalism, where the focus is on providing traditional disciplinary ways of thinking and practicing. Enterprise, that focuses on preparing students for employability, that's a big one these days, and future workplaces, often by supporting technological innovation and allowing industry and the professions to influence us. And his last cluster was social reconstructivism, that focuses on critical analysis, teaching students to think for themselves so that they can uncover inequality and unfairness in society and help to transform it. I'm sure you can find your reason for teaching in one or more of these ideological clusters. Perhaps you may have other ideologies not captured in Trowler's clusters. After all, this is not the only classification of perspectives on teaching. You may, for example, be familiar with the Teaching Perspectives Inventory, or TPI, which is a 4 to 5 item self-assessment instrument that asks teachers to reflect on their teaching beliefs, intentions, and actions, and then summarizes their responses to provide a profile of their dominant teaching perspectives. It is a well-researched instrument that was developed over 2 decades in a number of countries, in Canada, the US, China, Hong Kong, and Singapore. And it has been translated into several different languages, and well over 100,000 teachers have used it. How many people have used the TPI? Anybody? Very good. This is really, really good. Oh, you are a progressive university. So for those of you who have not used it, the 5 perspectives in the TPI are transmission, which emphasizes mastery of the subject matter or content and transmitting it clearly, correctly, systematically, and efficiently. Apprenticeship, which believes that good teachers are highly skilled practitioners of what they teach and can therefore help students achieve mastery of skills. I think at my own university, many of the instructors in the Faculty of Public Administration at Carleton are themselves practicing public administrators in the government and of course Ottawa is the capital, so we have a lot of people, you know, from the diplomatic service, the diplomatic corps and government agencies who are actually doing this on a daily basis so they can bring their practice into the classroom. Apprenticeship. Developmental, the third perspective, embraces the idea that good teachers understand how their learners think and reason, so they plan and teach from the learner's perspective, making the material accessible and meaningful. The fourth perspective, nurturing. Good teachers promote a climate of caring and trust and provide encouragement, support, clear expectations, and reasonable goals to help learners succeed. What's important is the growth and development of the individual student in this perspective. And then the last one, social reform. The object of teaching is the collective rather than the individual. Many of you, your answers suggested that. So effective teaching seeks to change society in substantive ways. And for those of you who've not done the TPI, if you want to do so, to take the inventory, you can go to www.teachingperspectives.com and you can find it and get a profile of the perspectives that you probably know but maybe have not articulated before. So as you can see, these teaching perspectives are broadly similar in some ways to the ideological clusters identified earlier by Trowler. Of course, whether we're considering the ideological clusters or the teaching perspectives, we have to acknowledge that they're not always practical. For example, apprenticeship. It's not always possible to bring somebody who's a practicing administrator or whatever the field is into the classroom. And it may be difficult, if not impossible, to enact them all at the same time. They're not necessarily hierarchical. Though, of course, understanding threshold concepts through transmission may often be a prerequisite to some of the other approaches. Nor are they mutually exclusive. For example, you can have a transmission perspective as well as an apprenticeship perspective. They don't preclude you from focusing on social reform, for example. Nor is there any suggestion that one is better than the other. Rather, they might best be conceived as a series of sort of Venn diagrams, or perhaps a continuum from a focus on giving access to and developing individual students to a focus on helping students develop their communities or various communities of the world, with numerous overlaps and intersections in between. Today, we might refer to them as different philosophies of teaching, much like the philosophies that we include in our teaching portfolios. Whatever we call them, the fact is that most teachers have an ideology or a philosophy, a belief system that underlies their motivation for teaching, and it is important to understand that motivation. So whether you articulate it or not, underlying what you do is a reason for doing it. Understanding your motivation for teaching begins with understanding yourself as a teacher. But that also requires some understanding of who you are as a person. Who are you? What do you believe in? What are your values? How do you describe yourself? In other words, what is your social identity? Essentially, the concept of social identity allows us to understand how individuals' membership in various groups may shape their perspectives and experiences. According to social identity theory, people define themselves in terms of their classification in different groups. This classification enables them to understand who they are based on personal characteristics, as well as on their perception of belonging or not belonging to particular social groups. Thus, individuals' definitions of themselves involve accentuating similarities of people belonging to the same group and differences of people belonging to different social groups. For example, people's self-identification as belonging to the classification of old, like me, right, only becomes meaningful in relation to their definition of others as belonging to the category young, our first-year student, perhaps. This is one reason why students tend to gravitate toward other students whom they perceive as belonging to the same social group as they do. Beverly Daniel Tatum authored a book in 1997 that addresses this phenomenon called "Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria?" And of course, she goes on to explain in the book, it's not just black kids, Hispanic kids and other kids, they find something in the social identity of others that is similar to theirs, right? As another example, social identity allows us to understand why a white, able-bodied professor may entirely unconsciously identify with and pay more attention to the white or able-bodied students in his or her class, while black students or those with physical disabilities may go unnoticed, even though they may be more visible. People attach value to each group to which they belong, so that positive, negative, or ambivalent feelings are aroused by the knowledge of each group membership. For example, I assume that most of you have positive feelings associated with being a South African citizen, just as I have about being a Guyanese Canadian. Whether we like the groups to which we belong or not, we often perceive ourselves as psychologically intertwined with the fate of the group. Just consider our response to the teams representing us at the Olympics. We cheer for them and feel their joy at success and their disappointment in defeat, regardless of how little we may know or even like them as individuals. And I use that Olympic example because that's me. I don't play any sports, never have. But when it comes to Olympic time, I am just like glued to the TV, and I am cheering on the people that belong to me. They're mine. And when they fail, I'm in tears, and I'm psychologically intertwined with the fate of the group that I have identified with. And I'm sure that there are other examples, but I always think of that as an example of myself. But here's the thing. Our social identity also influences how others view us. Even if an individual doesn't place much value or emotional significance on his or her membership in a particular group, others will still attribute what they perceive as typical characteristics of that group to him or her and interact with him or her on that basis. For example, membership in the female social group may be the primary basis on which her male colleagues interact with a female professor, even if she perceives her identity as a professor as a more salient social identity than her gender. Since the horrific events of September 11, 2001, many people from Islamic communities residing in the US have experienced being psychologically intertwined in the faith of their group, as others have interacted with them only on the basis of their social identity as Muslims. And we hear, of course, almost every day, certainly in the US, but elsewhere as well, and Canada is no exception, of instances of people reacting to people, especially police, reacting to others because they are black. So we talk about living while black. It used to be driving while black. Now it's living while black. People calling the police and saying, oh, there's a little black girl selling water outside my gate. And the police come, you know, lights flashing, etc., because the person is black. To sum up, our group affiliations or our social identity structures, if you will, influence our concept of self, our value systems, our conception of our institutions, our behaviors, and our interpersonal relations with others, whether or not they have the same social identity structures. So if we are to understand the dynamics of our interactions with others, we must understand the social identity structures, ours and theirs, that influence those interactions. And we can't separate the need to understand others from the need to understand ourselves. We need to begin by understanding the many dimensions of our own social identity and how our social identity may influence our interactions with others, especially with our students. So let's do a short exercise that is useful in helping us to understand the dimensions of our own social identity. Who am I? Strange question to be asked in a room of scholars, but let's ask it. And what I'd ask you to do is to draw a pie chart to represent your social identity, and then cut the pie into slices and label each slice so that it represents a socially relevant group affiliation that has influenced your concept of self and that you feel is important in defining you. For example, one slice might be a female slice, another slice might be South African, another might be Buddhist, another might be maybe atheist or whatever. The size of the slice should symbolize the relative strength of the influence of that group in terms of who you are. And if you feel comfortable doing so, after you've done your pie chart, you can share your diagram with the person sitting next to you, only if you feel comfortable doing so. Take a minute. Again, I will be quiet to allow you to draw your social identity chart. This is the point at which I sing the Jeopardy tune. That's only 1 minute. Take another minute. Okay, I hate to interrupt the budding artists, but we need to move on. Time is not going to allow us to do more than get a flavor of this exercise. So I'm not going to ask you to share your charts publicly, but it's something that, you know, you can continue working on outside of this and thinking of, you know, what are the components of your social identity? You know, reflect on that. But as a matter of interest, I just want to see, for those of you who shared, how many pairs had the exact social identity diagram? Just as I expected, none. There are no two identity charts that are exactly alike. What lessons can we learn from this? For one, this exercise illustrates that there's great diversity in this room, even among a group of people who teach, work, and learn in the same university, many in the same field, and who chose to attend this conference because of a common interest in the topic. More importantly, the exercise also emphasizes just how complex human diversity is and reinforces that we all have multiple social identities with numerous intersections among them, as suggested by this graphic. Now just imagine if you were to do an exercise like this with your students. Given the unique historical, racial, linguistic, sociocultural, and economic contexts of South Africa, of Stellenbosch and Stellenbosch University, how similar or how different do you think their social identity charts would look? And it tells us something about our students, who we are and who they are. As teachers, our social identity matters. Whether we acknowledge it or not, our social identity influences our motivation for teaching, how we teach, and our relationships with our students. This idea is captured in an interesting article entitled "Teaching Subjectively: Interdisciplinary Insights" in a 2016 issue of the Canadian Journal for Scholarship of Teaching and Learning. The 5 female authors, all with different social identities, for example, one identifies as biracial, another as Jewish, and a third as a practicing social worker. That was her dominant social identity that she described. They all reflect on what it has meant for them to teach subjectively, having to negotiate constantly the tensions between their identities, their beliefs, their behaviors, the theories they draw on, their pedagogical practices, and their relationships with students and colleagues, who of course all have different social identities as well. So the question becomes, how do we navigate these tensions so that our teaching remains effective? Are we expected to leave our identities at the classroom door in the name of objectivity? Can we really ever be truly objective? This brings us back to the question of why we are teaching in the first place. If we are teaching merely for the purpose of transmitting information, then perhaps these tensions do not matter. We may not even experience them. We can simply transmit information and be done with it. In fact, we may not even need to be present. We can simply perhaps point students to the information we think they need to know. Elsewhere in an article about the future of university teaching, I've referred to John Henry Newman, the 19th century academic and priest, who famously wrote in his 1852 treatise on the idea of a university that it is, quote, a place for teaching universal knowledge, unquote, which implies that knowledge is static, unidimensional, and handed down from generation to generation. However, few people today would argue that the sole purpose of a university education is to transmit a body of knowledge, a canon that is both universal and ageless. The modern university has long evolved to a place where there is more than one way of knowing, and knowledge, with its multidimensionality, is not simply given, but is also created or constructed, and is so dynamic as to be constantly evolving. So if our teaching is for a greater purpose, then who we are and the choices we make about our teaching do matter. They matter a great deal, especially in the context of the many disruptions in our world today. Look around us. Whether we're speaking of political disruptions, technological disruptions, or disruptions in the economic, social, labor, or environmental spheres, Our world is constantly changing in dramatic ways. And like us, our students are very much aware of and affected by these changes. Indeed, sometimes they are the leaders and authors of these changes. And as you well know from experience, students themselves are changing. So what is our role in such contexts? Are we content to adopt a transmission teaching perspective, or perhaps a traditionalist or an enterprise ideology, where all that matters is adhering to the disciplinary canon or ensuring that our students are employable upon graduation? Do we confront these disruptions in our teaching, in our interactions with our students, or do we ignore them? Do we as teachers support social change and social justice in the current climate of apparent disorder? Do we feel comfortable to take a stand when confronted with issues in our classrooms that threaten our subjective selves, or that we know may have threatened our students' social identities? Or should we be apolitical? Do we feel free to draw on our identities, our beliefs, our personal theories in our teaching behaviors and pedagogical practices? Roxanne Martinson in 2016 distinguished between negative freedom, that's freedom from doing something, and positive freedom, freedom to do something. Whereas negative freedom is restrictive, positive freedom allows us, in their words, to express ourselves, to do things, and to become something in the world, to be noticed. Do we use the power we have as academics, and we do have power, to exert positive freedom, to express our perspectives on issues that our students are grappling with in their daily lives? To what extent do we feel free to be activists and radical practitioners, prepared to change the status quo, or at least to help our students and our institutions to engage in critical thinking about these issues? And can we do so without the risk of silencing, alienating, or otherwise excluding those students who do not share our ideologies or perspectives? I think we would all agree that teaching is central to the academic mission of any university. When we admit a student into a program of study, we are implicitly entering into an unwritten contract in which we are committing to provide the best opportunities for that student's intellectual and creative development. In essence, we commit to providing a rich and diverse experience that will arouse a spirit of inquiry to help him or her to contribute to the broader community of scholars and develop knowledge, skills, and attitudes that are the hallmarks of productive, responsible citizens. Regardless of our discipline or the focus of our research, we ultimately make choices about how we teach and the type of learning experiences that we create to engage students in the learning process. We have a responsibility to create learning environments in which students could thrive, to motivate them to be the best that they could be, and enable them to transform and extend knowledge in ways that deepen their understanding, develop their ability to think critically, and ultimately facilitate their full and effective participation in society. Indeed, your own vision statement declares that Stellenbosch aspires to be recognized as excellent, inclusive, and innovative, advancing knowledge in service of society. Specifically, you seek to be, and I quote here, a transformed and integrated academic community that celebrates critical thinking, promotes debate, and is committed to democracy, human rights, and social justice with an outward, international, and future focus. End of quote. Your Vision 2040, Forward Together, I love that, forward together, it sounds like an army marching into the future, declares that you seek to have, and again I quote, an all-encompassing impact on the social, financial, and environmental well-being of the town, region, country, and continent with a global reach. That's powerful. That's a powerful vision. And your mission states that Stellenbosch wants to be a place connected to the world while enriching and transforming local, continental, and global communities. So yes, teaching does matter. Your teaching matters. But whether these lofty ideals are realized could depend on, among other things, how your ideologies, your perspectives, and your identities impact the choices you make about teaching. Let me share with you an integrated teaching and learning framework that I've developed to help us understand how we can put students and their success at the center of all we do, and how we can really make teaching matter. This is an integrated framework because it does not focus only on the content of what we teach, but encourages us to think of how we teach, the context in which we teach, and why we teach. Our teaching choices should take all of these elements into consideration. The framework is based on some core values, several of which are also identified in your Vision 2040. Values such as inclusivity, respect, flexibility, responsiveness, integrity, and community. As well as on some guiding educational principles that research on teaching and learning has told us is effective in achieving the kinds of engagement and deep learning that we seek. Principles such as learning-centeredness, outcomes-based, being outcomes-based, using active and collaborative approaches, and promoting lifelong learning. This diagram represents a synopsis of how the components in the framework can help accomplish our teaching and learning goals derived from such core values and guiding principles. Essentially, there are 5 interrelated components of the framework. Let's see if I can get this laser. At the core of the programs, there we go. At the core of the programs we offer is the first component, the overriding goal of engaging students to promote deep learning and ultimate success at the university and beyond. This requires us to pay special attention to 3 other components that I call the 3 C's: content, conduct, and context. By content, I'm referring to what we include in our curricula. There we go. That's our content. If our programs are to be responsive to current, current and future societal needs, then they should be outcomes-based. Our program should also be truly interdisciplinary and diverse, providing multiple new and global perspectives. It has long been recognized that there is no significant problem of the world that can be solved by one discipline alone. Many graduates today tend to be experts in 1 or 2 content areas and often have to go back to school, learn on the job, or find some other means of educating themselves in other areas. Our graduates should be well equipped to solve old as well as new problems because our teaching helps them acquire the necessary knowledge, skills, and attitudes to do so. By content, I'm referring to the kinds of teaching processes or behaviors that we use to ensure retention, high completion rates, employability, and future success. Our students need to be engaged in innovative, high-impact practices. High-impact practices, or HIPs as we call them fondly, adopt a student-centered and multi-pronged approach to teaching and learning. They are typically active, collaborative, and experiential or immersive pedagogies that involve students in their own learning through meaningful connections with the material, their peers, and their instructors. High-impact practices may include community-based pedagogy or service learning, inquiry or discovery-based learning, peer instruction, team-based learning, various technology-mediated approaches, first-year experience initiatives, various cooperative, internship, or practicum experiences where relevant, and other innovative pedagogies and practices. These, of course, may vary across disciplines, undergraduate or graduate levels, and even delivery modes, for example, face-to-face, online, or blended methods. HIPs also include diverse assessment strategies that are both learning opportunities and opportunities for students to demonstrate their learning. The goal is to empower and engage students through self-discovery, high-level thinking, and other approaches that allow them to learn deeply, to see the relevance of what they're learning, and to continue learning long after they have left the sphere of our immediate influence. And then by context, I'm referring to the kinds of learning environments that we foster. Teaching is not only what takes place in a classroom or online between the instructor and the students. A university should be committed to providing an educational experience that takes place in a safe, inclusive, participatory learning environment that respects and nurtures students holistically, with cohesive supports for their academic, professional, personal, psychological, and social development. This suggests that we should establish relationships with our students, make connections with them, get to know them, mentor them, and provide advice, leadership, advocacy, and support. In other words, we need to provide the human touch in our students' education, especially in this age of digital technology. George Lucas, the famous filmmaker and founder of the George Lucas Educational Foundation, has said, "Digital technology can do many amazing things for the learning process, but it can't be human." Some may disagree with Lucas about digital technology. Digital technology's lack of humanity. But when we ourselves reflect on who were our best teachers at various levels of our education, we almost always identify those teachers who connected with us and who cared for us. Of course, contributions to the teaching and learning enterprise can be made at several levels of the educational ecosystem. The micro or individual level, the meso level, that is the departmental or faculty level, the macro or institutional level, and the mega level, which refers to impacts at a disciplinary, interdisciplinary, national, or international level. Given the diversity of the students in today's university, especially in today's South Africa, I believe each of these levels can help to foster learning environments that allow all students an equal opportunity to succeed regardless of their social identities. Ultimately, the supportive learning environment, varied teaching and learning activities, and outcomes-based curricula all have in common the ability to engage students, promote effective learning, and help students to respond successfully to the challenges of local, national, and international communities, whether these are academic, social, or cultural. As the diagram shows, these communities constitute the fifth component of the framework. They answer the proverbial question, the proverbial so what question, the why our teaching matters. The goal is not for our students to acquire knowledge for its own sake, although they are free to do so as well. But more importantly, it is to help them to contribute to society's well-being, to solve the consequential or significant problems of the world, just as Ernest Boyer envisioned so many years ago in what's now become a classic, Scholarship Reconsidered, Priorities of the Professoriate. Boyer saw teaching as transformative because it attends to larger social perspectives. Teaching that matters not only helps to make direct and indirect contributions to society, but allows the university to enjoy better relationships with society, very different from earlier perceptions of the university as an ivory tower that is inaccessible and distant from the communities in which it is embedded. So we have to ask ourselves as academics, professional staff, and administrators, are the choices we make with regard to each of the components of this framework consistent with the teaching ideologies, perspectives, and philosophies that we reflected on earlier? Are they consistent with who we are, with our social identities? What are some implications of this discussion for our practice? I'd like to suggest one implication, that we follow Boyer's advice and reconsider our scholarship. And I'll end with some suggestions for how we might do so. These are couched in terms of a set of questions in 4 areas of scholarship for us to explore as individuals, in groups, departments, and as a university. The process of reconsidering our scholarship begins with introspection, questioning our current teaching strategy. So some relevant questions might be, what is my perspective on teaching or my teaching ideology? Oops, here we go. How is this reflected in my choices with regard to content, conduct, and context? Are my choices consistent with my espoused teaching ideology or perspective? Then it is useful to gather and explore evidence, research the literature. Relevant questions here might include, who are my students? What are their goals, their interests? What does the literature and or my own research say about them and their generational counterparts, about how they learn, about their interests? Why are they here in my class, this program, or at Stellenbosch University? How do my choices and actions affect them? What are their views on, you name it, some issue that is topical, that's current? You fill in the blank. How are they impacted by some of the current local, national, or even international events or issues in the news? Once we've gathered enough evidence, we may want to refine our strategy, test our new practices, engage in productive disruption, so to speak. We might ask ourselves, how can I disrupt the way I have been teaching so that I'm more effective or productive, so that my teaching relates more closely to my students' needs or goals, especially those relating to their communities? What can I do differently? Here you might want to consider each of the C's. For example, can I introduce new material in my readings? Can I develop new assignments that require students to work collaboratively or with the external community? What are the limits of both my negative and positive freedom to act differently? How will I know whether I'm doing differently, whether what I'm doing differently is effective? That is, how will I assess my impact? Then the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning process requires that we go public, that we contribute to the larger knowledge base of teaching and learning by sharing our work with others. So relevant questions here are, what do my colleagues think? How can I share what I've been doing or thinking of doing? Do my perspectives and actions align with theirs? Should they? Are these disruptive in a positive way, or do they create problems in my department, my faculty, or with my students even? Are others in my own and other departments or faculties, perhaps even in other universities, reconsidering their scholarship as well? Is there scope for us to collaborate or to establish a community of practice from which we could all learn? What advice can they give me? What can we learn from each other? As I said at the beginning, I don't expect you to attempt to answer these questions today. Perhaps you can find some time to do so before the 13th Scholarship of Teaching and Learning conference here in 2020. But I hope that they will help you on your journey of reconsidering your scholarship as you seek to make your teaching matter. It could be a daunting undertaking, but I assure you that it can also be exciting and rewarding. Good luck and enjoy the journey. Do we have time for questions? Okay, so we have time for questions. I think I might be there. Okay, 5 minutes of questioning. Oh, there are none. Okay. Or comments. I'm sure you don't agree with everything I said, so. Yes, I see a hand there.
Thank you very much. The thing that struck me about your identity matrix that you asked us,
Yes.
when you put up the various things, I realized that there were two things that I hadn't even considered. And I think it's maybe a useful reflection. One is sexual orientation, the other is race.
Yes.
I hadn't really considered it, probably because I'm white and straight. And yet how much that influences how students would perceive me. And it's the absences are as important as what we put on our.
Absolutely, and that's one of the reasons I show that, to show what is possible. And that doesn't even have all the other things that we could include, you know. But thank you for that comment. It's an interest. I encourage you to do that in the moments of your reflection, to do that, spend a little more time on that. We didn't have time today to do that, but it's always a revealing exercise because people realize, oh my God, this is something that has influenced who I am, but I hadn't given it recognition before. And of course, remember that your students similarly have a multitude of dimensions to their identity. Yes.
I just have a question with regards to us as educators exciting our freedom and not silencing or alienating those who share the same ideals. Like, how do you balance those two things? Because obviously I can have like a robust ideal as that woman, but then obviously with the white male counterparts, they would have those ideals and they are my students. So how that has also caused issues there. So how do you not silence and alienate those who aren't part of your social ideals?
Thank you for that question. That's really important. But I think the answer lies in the context that we create, the type of environment where there's trust. If we build a relationship with students and we listen, they can feel free to share their perspective without fear that we might judge them. I think that's one of the reasons why people don't share very often. And if we can create the kind of environment where students feel that they're two intellectuals sharing their views without one judging the other and suggesting that one view is bad or wrong, they might be able to come forward with their views that are different from yours. But of course you have to be open to that. And not many of us, we position ourselves as experts, these teachers, this role of teaching, and we sort of know more than the students. But one of the ways that we could create that different environment is to perceive students as partners. Partners in scholarship, partners in learning. And then we can honor the perspective that they might bring that might be different from ours without judging. So I hope that helps. Any others? Yes, go ahead.
My name is Newman. I just wanted to ask about the positive and the negative freedoms. So I just wanted to ask you to please give us an example of negative freedoms.
An example of negative. Well, as it suggests, it's restrictive in the sense that we may not be free to do certain things. In South Africa of the past, for example, you may not have been free to speak a certain language. And that might be restrictive in terms of building relationships or communicating. So that's restrictive in the sense you're free to talk, but not in the way that you want to talk, right? As opposed to the positive freedom where you opt to do something, where you choose to do something that will advance a particular goal, right? So there's a little more leeway, so to speak. The negative freedom is freedom that is freedom that is curtailed by certain rules and regulations, and we do a lot of that in our classrooms. You know, we wouldn't accept students' work if it's late, we wouldn't accept students' work if it's not submitted in the right format, we wouldn't, I mean, and sometimes some of those restrictions may prevent students from being creative, from being free, you know, they don't have the freedom to really be a co-creator in the enterprise that we call teaching and learning. Okay, last question, I'm told. Hello.
Looking at the reflective questions that you had,
Yes.
I'm wondering, can they bring someone to a place where they realize their ideology actually needs to change for them to better relate with their students?
That's a really good question. How does one realize? I think that in the section where you have the research, you know, the set of questions about research, finding out more about your students can help you to come to that place. If you realize, my God, they're way out there and I'm here, then maybe there's a way that I need to go, to travel, to get closer to them. So the onus for change may be on me, or the onus to learn about their perspectives may be on me. So getting that information is crucial to understanding what steps you need to take. Right? I hope that helps. All right, thank you so much.
Right, without further ado, I'd like to thank Dr. Mighty for a very insightful presentation, and really for the insights that you've given us, lots of food for thought, and I hope that we all will be able to reflect on some of those questions. It's now tea time, so thank you.